All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Leanne Foster, and I am a provider outreach and education specialist here at WPS Government Health Administrators. I'd like to welcome you again to our webinar today on provider enrollment responding to development requests. I'll first start with our disclaimer. So the material today is accurate as of today's session. I will also be answering any questions that come into the chat today, utilizing current information available on CMS and WPS websites. As you know, Medicare changes often, so please be sure that you're continuing to monitor official CMS communications, which again includes the CMS and WPS GHA website for the most up-to-date rules and regulations. I will be answering, like I said, those questions based on that same information. Recording of this presentation, screenshots, photographing is something that is strictly prohibited by CMS for profit-making purposes, and there's simply no need. As I mentioned moments ago, I did start a recording of this session. What that also means is that this session, barring any technical challenges with that recording, will be posted on our Encore page as soon as possible after this session. That's going to allow you to be able to take another look at it if there's something you missed, something you just want to see again, but also allows you to go ahead and share that with anybody that maybe wasn't able to attend that you think may benefit from the information in the session today. That brings me to our agenda for today. We are talking about how to effectively respond to development requests from our provider enrollment area. So today we are going to be talking about how to respond to requests for paper application submissions. We're also going to talk about how to respond to requests for electronic submissions. So if you submitted your application through our provider enrollment ownership, chain and ownership system, also known as PECOS, we are going to show you how to do that. I will be taking you step by step how to actually access the applications that we've requested development on, how to make those corrections, and then resubmit those. And then I'm also going to talk about who you're going to contact or how you're going to reach out if you have any questions regarding your development request. I do want to start with just a basic process overview for provider enrollment. This is the ideal path of how an application will go. The provider is going to submit the application. It's going to go through a screening review or a screening and verification process, as we'll call that. During that process, we are looking for things such as, do we have all of the CMS 855 sections? Are they complete? Are there any discrepancies? Is there anything additional that we need? We're also checking to see if there's an enrollment fee required, and if so, has that been paid? We can't even start the screening and review process or the screening and verification process without that enrollment fee being paid. So that's a big piece. We're also looking for any documentation that might be required. We do leverage source sites to validate information, things such as licensure, certifications, address verifications. We do leverage a lot of source sites to reduce that provider burden, but there are times where we're simply not able to verify information, and that might trigger a development request. We're also looking to make sure that all documentation is included. Like I mentioned, that can also be requested based on our inability to perhaps verify something. Again, a license, a certification, an address. Those are the ones that come to mind. Also, part of this process is going to be site visits. Now, typically the site visit piece happens as part of that screening request, and if there's development, it happens simultaneously. And the results of that can result in some form of development if we are getting feedback from the site visit contractor that we need to confirm this, or if something's not quite checking out. So if everything is received, everything's perfect, everything verifies, there's no development needed, and the application will move forward to an enrollment decision, which includes the assignment of a provider transaction access number, or PTAN number, or executing the change that was requested on that application. That could be changing address information, changing name information. It could be adding locations. It could be adding some type of certification that wasn't on file before. So we will execute what that is. This also includes revalidations. Now, if we need development, this process changes, and there are some different outcomes. So the same thing happens as far as the submission. There's a screening and verification review process that occurs where we validate that information. If we hit the need for development, at this point, what is needed will be documented in our system, and a letter or email, generally it's in the form of an email, will be generated and will be sent out requesting that information. If all of that information comes in, we continue down that same path. We'll review and validate all of the information that comes in. And if everything checks out, we're going to go ahead and continue on to that enrollment decision, including potential issuance of a PTAN, that provider transaction access number. Now, what can also happen is that we will get no response at all to our development. If we do not get a response to our development and we are still missing information within a specified time frame, and we'll talk about that in a minute, we will reject the application for failure to respond. That rejection process can also happen if we receive a response, but it's incomplete and it still doesn't satisfy the enrollment requirements for the provider listed on the application. We can also reject that application. If an application is rejected, it's not the same thing as a denial. It doesn't mean that the provider cannot enroll. It's the rejection of an application in process. If that application is rejected, the provider can certainly resubmit that application, including all of the information that was requested, and we can start the process again as far as reviewing, screening, making sure we have everything, and then ultimately making that enrollment decision. There is a time limit, though. We'll talk about that in a minute, but first I want to talk about what that enrollment notification is going to look like. So you're going to get that notification typically in an electronic format. We leverage electronic format as much as we can. We try not to send anything out regular mail, particularly for these development requests, if we can avoid it. There's a lot of reasons for that. Certainly there's the postage, but more importantly, it's more efficient. If we can send out that development to the provider, responses come in quicker, and we can get that application on its way and minimize or eliminate any significant delays to the provider. So you're going to see these development notifications come in from email, provided we are given a contact person email. So we're sending this information to the contact person and email listed in section 13. Couple things I want to point out here. We're only sending out one, and we're only sending the email out to one of the contacts. Certainly, you can list more than one contact on the application, but if there is one contact that we should be reaching out to first, please make some type of notation on the application itself. That helps us ensure this gets to the person that it needs to. Again, we're only sending out that one email, and it's only going out to the one address. This is system generated, and it's looking for that first email. Also, make sure that that email is accurate. The things that we will see are that the email maybe is missing something or something is misspelled, and it'll bounce back. The other thing that we'll see is that the person is maybe gone, or that it's going to some kind of shared mailbox. And sometimes those will, the shared mailboxes don't really usually bounce back, but what we run into is if the person that it's being emailed to is gone, it sits in their mailbox and they don't necessarily see it. So please have contingencies in place in your office if that's going to be something that occurs, just to make sure that everything is sent to the right place. we cannot resend that email to somebody who's not listed on that application. That is per CMS for privacy reasons because of the information that's on these applications. So that email is going to come to you from one of two senders. The first one that you're seeing is the customer service. It's a do not reply email from cms.gov. This is going to be the sender if the application was submitted through PECOS and the development was sent through PECOS. Don't reply to this. As you can see, it is a do not reply. That is not a monitored mailbox. It's also a CMS mailbox. It's not specific to the Macs, and there's no routing functionality in it to get it to the Mac. What the provider enrollment analyst will list their contact information in the email that comes from this mailbox so that you know exactly who to reach out to. They'll also include a customer service number. Now, if it's a paper application, the sender is different. It's going to be pe.medicare@wpsic.com. That is a shared mailbox, but again, I recommend that you're looking at the contact information in the content of the letter to ensure the most effective communication with the analyst that's requesting the additional information. And they will include that, again, along with that contact number. Some things that we see with these, though. We do see these bounce back because they're not getting through spam filters or various firewalls that we all work with on a daily basis to try and keep kind of the junk out of our emails. I do encourage you, if you're having trouble getting electronic notifications, that you're working with your systems area to add these two senders to your safe senders list, just to make sure that you are receiving these. Now, if those emails do bounce back, we will then take that development request and we will send that out paper. But during that process, some of the time frame has elapsed, and we will resend that. The time frame doesn't necessarily start because, again, the correct information, or does not restart because the correct information should have been placed on that application. So the timeline, as I said, the timeline is not indefinite. There is a timeline. The development timeline from the date that letter is sent, and it is the date that letter is sent because we're sending them electronically. And I would say we're sending well over probably 95% or more of our development requests through electronic means. So that means that that is getting delivered on the day that we're sending it. So from the date of that letter, the providers have 30 calendar days. I want to stress that is calendar days. Holidays and weekends count in that 30 days. That is the time frame they have with which to respond completely to the development request and provide us with the information that we have asked for. Now, there's a couple of things that can happen here. A lot of times, because we're sending these electronically, we get the responses pretty quickly. And when that comes in, it does get put into our workflow system in priority order as it came in, and we will continue to work that. I have seen instances where we send out a development request and it's the same day that something comes in, and it's quite possible the next day that it's getting worked on. So it's pretty quick. We still have our CMS established processing timelines, and we work within those. And again, that's going to adjust a little bit based on inventory at the time. But we will work those as quickly as possible. What we also see is we'll get a response, but it's incomplete. So if it's incomplete, CMS does not have a requirement that the Macs need to reach out to the provider to try and obtain the information that is still not included with the application. And Macs in general, I can speak for WPS, we are making efforts to reach out when we have an incomplete development request if there is a reasonable amount of time before the 30 calendar days. We would rather not reject these applications and have the provider go through the process of resubmitting these and having us go through and process these again. We'd like to get them in here and process them the first time. So we do work with the providers. We are going to look at a reasonable amount of time. If we get an incomplete request 7-10 days into the development, even 20 days into that development, you are going to get a email or a phone call from someone in the provider enrollment area saying, hey, we received your response. We still have a few things that we need. Can you help me obtain that? So we will work with you. If we get something the day that it's due and it's incomplete, chances are that we are not going to be able to work with you. We cannot issue an extension to that 30 days, and that application is likely to be rejected. Sometimes it depends if it's something that can be faxed in really quick, but it is not going to allow for an extension. But we do work with you as quickly as possible. So please be sure you're responding to those development requests as quickly as you can. Obviously, we all have a lot going on, a lot on our plates, but you want to make sure that you respond to those timely. If an application is rejected and it's requesting a PTAN, our PTAN effective dates, if they are going to be made retroactive, are based on the receipt date of the application. So if we have an application that is received today and we develop for it and it's 3 weeks before we get the response, it wants a retroeffective date, it's still going to be calculated based off of the receipt date of today. However, if it gets rejected and resubmitted, that application starts over. And it's going to be based off of that new submission's receipt date. So that's another reason we work with the providers, to ensure that we're trying to maintain that receipt date so that we're able to grant the effective dates being requested. So this is what the paper development letter is going to look like. The paper development letter is going to have the mailing address information at the top. That is what you are seeing the gold box highlighting. And this is again going to be the contact information that is listed in section 13. It's also going to identify, as represented here with the green box, it's going to give you the control number. That control number is super helpful if you call into customer service or a provider enrollment analyst. That's going to help them quickly locate your application in our system. And if there's a PTAN, it's going to be listed. So in the case of a change or revalidation, that information is going to be there, and the MPI. And then it's going to be addressed to the provider. And this is going to help you determine which provider you're working with, because I know many of you on the call probably work with multiple. It's going to help you quickly determine who this is regarding, which application it's regarding. And then you're also going to see the requested information. I do have a couple of things here that are redacted because they had some private information in them, but your letters are going to look very much like this. They're going to be separated usually in some type of bullet format, and they are going to request the information that is still needed to process the application. So you want to make sure that you are responding to all of the items when you respond. One of the things we see often with unsuccessful development is that they missed an item. Also keep in mind this letter could be multiple pages. When you open it, make sure you're not just looking at that first page. That can result in some challenges. So just make sure that you're looking for all of it. And usually on the last or the second to last page, just kind of depends on how long the letter is. Sometimes it's the first page, but that's usually for pretty simple development, such as I just need a signature. It's going to have the contact information for customer service and the contact information for the analyst that has reviewed your application. So if you have any questions, that'd be where you'd go. Before I move on to what an electronic letter looks like, I do just want to share with you some recent statistics on the types of development that we're seeing frequently. First and foremost, we see a lot of Section 2. This has to do with identifying information. So the provider's name, maybe there's an issue with the date of birth. We see where names have maybe changed, and what's being reported on the application doesn't match what is on file with the Social Security Administration. We absolutely have to have the information that's on file with the Social Security Administration. Our systems do verify that we have the current legal name as reported. We can't see inside of that system, but that system will kick out and tell us the last name doesn't match, the date of birth doesn't match, and that will trigger a development. We cannot get that provider into our systems if it doesn't match. And the other thing we'll see is the NPI, so that National Provider Identifier, the MPES system, the National Enumeration System, is not matching. All of those things have to match in order for us to be able to move forward with that application. We do see practice location information. Now, this is typically going to be on your groups and organizations or your providers that are in solo practice. We do see where we have addresses that do not verify. Sometimes this is legitimate. It might be a new building and we just need some documentation stating that the address does in fact exist. Otherwise, we are trying to use Postal Service source websites to verify that information. So we'll develop for that. Section 5 and 6, these are ownership and managing control sections. 5 is for organizations and 6 is for individuals. Again, you see this more on organizations and groups. So your CMS 855B. Sometimes you can see the managing control on someone in private practice. This is again where we see things like the names are missing or the appropriate roles aren't indicated, or perhaps for Section 5, we'll see a legal business name for the business or the parent company isn't matching the tax identifier that they've reported. These are all things that we will develop for. And then the other thing we see fairly often is supporting documentation. CMS has tried to minimize the amount of documentation that is required, but there are some things we simply cannot bypass. Things such as IRS tax documentation for organizations, businesses, things of that nature. There are some certifications that we cannot verify through a source website. Nurse practitioner is one that comes to mind. If we have trouble verifying a state licensure, or if we need to know about a business license, these are things that you may see requested as documentation. Additional forms, the CMS 588, which is the electronic funds transfer form. If that's required, we will develop for that, as along with account documentation. So moving on to what a PECOS development looks like. PECOS development is for applications that were submitted through PECOS. So the standard is that how we receive the application is how we are going to develop for any missing information. Paper is going to get that letter template that you just saw, and PECOS is going to see an email like this. However, there is one exception to that. To make things easier, we will develop on a PECOS submitted application utilizing that letter template if the only thing missing is, say, documentation. When we develop through PECOS, when the corrections are submitted, it requires a new signature, and we try to avoid that. So if you get a letter template, or if it's something we know cannot be submitted through PECOS because of some system limitation, you might see that letter template. But typically you're going to see this email. This email is generated from PECOS. Macs do not have control over the layout of it. However, we do work with it and manipulate it where we can to make it easier to read. So the subject line is going to have the PECOS tracking number. This is something I would keep handy. This is very helpful if you're needing to call about questions, either to customer service or the analyst that sent this out. That's going to help them more quickly, more efficiently find that application. And it is unique to each application. Then you're going to see the green boxes highlighting kind of a blue area that I've redacted some personal information, but that's going to be the provider identification information. Again, so that you know which provider this is for. We recognize that you're probably working with multiple providers, so how do you find that? And then underneath that, in the red, you're going to see the information that is needed. Now, this is the spot that Macs try to manipulate a little bit. They try to put what is needed in a bullet format based on the functionality they can control within PECOS, again, to make it easier. One of the biggest things we see here is people miss pieces in this information. So just make sure that you're looking through that and providing us with everything that we've requested. Before I get in how you're going to respond to these developments, I do want to talk about some of the common errors that we see for electronic. You're going to see some similarities, but you're also going to see fewer. And that is because submitting electronically gives you a customized experience where it's asking you for all of the information and fields are required. So you might put incorrect information in a field, but it's going to be really hard for you to forget to give us a piece of information. You won't see the name here because that is something that's getting verified as you're submitting that application. But we do see the same issues with practice location information and the ownership and managing control information, specifically with individuals more often than organizations. So just want to make sure that all the most accurate information is getting in there and that we're going to be able to verify things. Right now, we do see a lot of requests for electronic signatures. We do recognize part of that is because if you have an application that requires an authorized or delegated official, there is an up to 72-hour, I don't want to call it a delay, but there's a 72-hour process where you request the signature of the AO, and then that authorized official has to go in and they have to go through the steps of signing and appending their signature to that application, and that can take some time. Where we are in processing, we are typically ahead of those. We're typically looking at our applications in the first couple of days. And so sometimes we are reviewing it before that signature has been completed. I am going to show you how to just complete that signature without having to resubmit the application. And then we do also see supporting documentation. So we will talk about how to best upload documentation to PECOS because we do hear feedback that sometimes that can be a little bit confusing. So before I move on to responding, Ellen, do we have any questions in the chat?
Not at this time, Leanne.
All right, thank you. So responding to our development requests, I'm going to start with paper development. So with paper development, you are going to want to make updates to copies of the application. I do want to point out you only have to send in the sections that we are asking for corrections and a signature. If you are making corrections to a section that is part of the physical application, we are going to need a new signature, and this is true of paper and web. We are going to need a new signature attesting to those changes or certifying those. When you send those, there are two methods, fax, and I have included the fax number. This fax number is your most efficient and best way of submitting your corrections. Anything faxed to this number is going directly into our work management system, and the development letter has some scan bars that you'll notice on the letter. You want to make sure you include this letter. Our system, when it's faxed in, can read those. That is actually embedding the application ID so that the system can match your resubmission or your development response with the application that precipitated that development. So that is absolutely the quickest, easiest, most successful way to submit those. The other option is US mail, and you're certainly welcome to do that. And you will just have to keep in mind with the development timeline of 30 calendar days, you need to allow for mail time, and then we will need to open that and scan that into our system. Just takes a little bit longer, but again, including that letter makes that go a little bit more smoothly and ensures that things get matched up. One thing that we do discourage is emailing. Now that email address is a shared mailbox and it is monitored. However, a lot of times our development requests do require the inclusion of sensitive information. So we're not going to encourage that is sent via email for your safety, for your protection. And then also those still need to go through a process to get ingested into our work management system. It doesn't happen automatically like it does with fax. So I do encourage you to leverage that. The other thing with paper If you've sent in a paper application, we currently do not have a mechanism inside of PECOS for you to provide your responses. That is something they're looking at for PECOS 2. Not sure where that's going to land, but that is something that they're looking for to make things a little bit easier on the provider community and the MACs. So at this time, you would need to submit that through fax and US mail. You cannot submit it through PECOS. We do see where providers do try to submit that, but what they're really doing is they're submitting a brand new application and it doesn't get matched up. It's not recognized as a development response until an analyst actually sees that and reviews it and realizes that it is. From there, they'll take it and get it matched up, but it can result in a little bit of delay. Okay. So next we'll talk about responding to an electronic submitted application. So this is going to be any application that you submit through PECOS. The steps to responding are going to be, first and foremost, review that development email and make sure that you have all of that requested information or that you're able to get that so that we can input that into the system. Then you're going to need to update the appropriate systems, which we'll go through here in a minute. Update those sections, attach any documents, upload those to PECOS. You don't have to correct application sections in PECOS and then fax documents. In fact, we discourage that. We want you to send it all in through PECOS, one nice neat little package that we have everything in one spot. You will need to sign any submission or resubmission through PECOS. Not only if you're making updates to the application sections, but also if you're submitting your documents through here. That is also why we will request documents utilizing the paper template so that you can just fax that so that we can avoid that step. However, if you prefer, you can submit them through PECOS and upload those. So to get into your application, you've gotten your email. You're going to need to sign into PECOS, just like you would if you were submitting the application. It's not going to look any different. And then you're going to end up on the landing page that you see here. And you're going to have a couple of options. And I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit because, as I said earlier, oftentimes we are seeing scenarios where we're literally just developing for a pending signature. I don't want you to touch the application itself if all we need is a pending signature and you can get to it from this landing. So any of your connected providers for applications that you've submitted on their behalf, if they are in a scenario where they have pending signatures, there is a section at the bottom of that landing page that is titled Manage Signatures. And it will list and it'll give you a link. It'll allow you to manage that signature and have that signed. Certainly the authorized or delegated official or the provider is going to have to do that. They will see this as well. So when they sign in, if they see something in manage signature, those are signatures that they have to append to the application. They can go in through the links, follow the steps, it will attach it, and as soon as they send it, usually overnight cycle, I've seen it sooner, but we will see a complete signature into the system, and we do look for those. So that's if all you need is a signature. If you need more, if we're asking for documentation in the sections, you're going to need to go into the My Associates button, which you're seeing here highlighted in that gold. So you're going to select that, and when you get into the My Associates, you're going to have a few options. The top image that you see here is creating an initial enrollment application. Don't do that. We're responding to development. Stay away from that button. That will generate a new application and it won't connect. You will see some application warnings. One is open for corrections. That is going to be any application that you yourself touched to make corrections before we developed for it. So if you have something sitting there, take a look at that. We can see that you've touched it, but oftentimes we can't see why. So you want to make sure that that section stays nice and clear. You don't want anything hanging out there. The section below it is the return for correction section, and this is where your going to access the applications that you've received development emails for. You're only going to be able to see those which you submitted or have connections to. It's going to show those applications, and you're going to have a couple of options. You can view the email notification. So if you didn't get it, um, if you have access and you're one of the contacts, you'd be able to see that here. It will be here in PECOS. So it works just a little different because everybody's on there. You're going to have two buttons, view and more options. View is still going to be that email notification. So that's not going to be real helpful here. You actually want to go into the more options button. When you select that more options button, you're going to get the image that you're seeing here on the bottom, where it's going to give you two options. It's going to give you the option to correct or update the application, and that is the one you want. You want to select the radio button, that's what we call those little circles, to correct or update the application and go to the next page. And I'll show you what that does in a minute. If you select delete application, what that's going to do is it's going to remove the application not only from your queue, but from ours as well. And we can't bring that back on the Mac side. CMS can't bring that back either. So be very careful if you select which radio button you're selecting. Delete application does not have an undo. It will ask you if you're sure, but it does not have an undo. And the only thing we can do at that point is to resubmit the application. And we want to avoid that for you. So if you are selecting the more options and you have selected to correct or update the application, it's going to take you to the topics view. It's going to look a lot like it did when you submitted this the very first time. So you're going to notice that the topics themselves are not highlighted. There's an error here, fix me there. You will maybe see something up in the upper right tab that says error warning check, but that's typically going to be a submission warning or error and not actually development information. So again, I'm going to refer you back to that development email. Make sure you're going through all of the sections that are indicated, and that email will tell you, and it will tell you what you need. So you'll go into each individual section and you'll make the corrections that you need. You'll also then have the option to upload documents, and you will then have to begin that submission process again, including appending any signatures to recertify the information is correct. So let's look at uploading documents first. You'll want to do that before appending any signatures. So at this point, what you have done is you've gone into each individual section outlined in that email and you've made the corrections. If there's documentation, you'll come here. You can tell the system that, yes, I'd like to upload one or more documents. And I just want to point out, if we've not sent development, but you know, oops, I need to attach a document and I didn't, even once this has been submitted and it's technically in Mac control, if you will, it's locked down. You can't necessarily change things on the application sections, but you can upload documents throughout the process. So feel free to do this. If you notice something after you submit it, you might be able to avoid a development that way. So to upload this, you are going to be asked to select a document type. There is a miscellaneous as well if none of them do fit. We look at all of them. We're not going to develop if the document type that you select isn't necessarily the document that's attached. We review those on their own merit and apply them as needed. You will then just go out and do a choose file, just like you would in any type of shared drive or your computer. You just go and grab the file that you want to upload. There are some limitations. One, it does have to be a portable document format or a PDF, or a tag image file format or a TIFF. PECOS currently does not support pictures. So like a PNG or a JPEG, those cannot be uploaded into PECOS. We can't see those on the Mac side. PECOS will likely give you errors. There's also a size limitation. Now this is usually a bigger concern if you've got an organization that maybe has a bill of sale or some incorporation documents that they want to upload, something multiple pages. PECOS can only accept a file upload of 10 megabytes. So keep in mind that if your file's too large, you might get errors. You simply just break that file up and you upload it as multiple documents. If you've got, say, a bill of sale or articles of incorporation, it's not ideal to break those up, but if you break those up into 2 files, we will find those and we'll be able to keep those together. So once you have all of your sections and all of your documents uploaded, you will want to begin the submission process, and it's going to look very much like it does for the initial submission. It's not going to say resubmission, it's just going to say begin submission. So it's going to send in an updated version of the form that we developed on. It is not going to submit a new application. PECOS does understand that this was here, there was development. I'm just going to show you the things that changed. And we can see that on our end. So you'll hit that button. Again, it will require a new signature. Corrections are going to be linked to that original application in PECOS. We're still going to be able to leverage any automation, all the automations that are in PECOS for verification, and we will get notified. We do look at that every morning to make sure that we are staying on top of any submissions. So keep that in mind. That is a pretty quick and efficient process. So the signature process, I keep mentioning this, and I just wanted to highlight this a little bit. So what's going to happen is you hit submission. It's going to ask you if you want to sign. It's going to ask you to manage your signatures, and you have a couple of options. You can either e-sign or you can upload. The upload is typically the certification that's going to be printed for you in the document section. Towards the bottom of the page, there'll be links, and you can actually print those out, have them physically signed, scan them, and get them into our system. We can also accept an electronic signature, say like an Adobe DocuSign, those kinds of things. We can, but we've got to have the date and timestamp on those for them to be valid. So you'll select the type of signature that you want, and then you'll continue through the prompts. If it's an upload, it's just telling you make sure that you've uploaded the document. With an e-signature, it's going to trigger that email that goes out to that authorized delegated official and asks them to come in and manage their signatures. Once you have done all of that, you will get a confirmation that your resubmission was sent. Again, it's going to look very much like you sent in a new application. You didn't. It is just the functionality in PECOS. It's going to tell you that your application and any uploaded documentation is being submitted to the MAC. If you have anything that needs to be mailed or faxed in, please go ahead and do that. We do look for that. If you're mailing or faxing, though, I do encourage you to attach that tracking number that's in your development email. That helps us match things up when they come in more easily. And then keep this, because this is going to, again, just be your confirmation that I submitted it on this date. Not that we should need it, but it's just, again, good for documentation to make sure nothing's getting lost. So some tips that I have for you for responding to developments, either electronically or for paper applications. Cannot stress enough, review the development request carefully, and you're going to refer to the letters for contact information. They will put the customer service phone number for your jurisdiction at the bottom of the letter. It is included. They are also going to include their contact information, name and phone of the analyst that reviewed the application. So if you have any questions, please ask. Reach out. There's documentation on your file that when you call in, we'll be able to take a look at that. Customer service will be able to help you through that letter. Make sure you're verifying the contact information that you're putting on the application itself when it comes in. If there's any errors in that, particularly that email address, we're going to run into some hiccups when we go to send out development, whether it's paper or PECOS submitted applications. So make sure that email is there. We don't use those emails for any type of marketing or spam or any type of solicitation there. The emails in the contact section are used for official enrollment purposes. So I encourage you to give us that and make sure that it's correct. Also verify that the contact listed on the application is the contact we need to be speaking with and that they're available. We've run into situations where the contact has maybe recently left and it didn't get corrected, but always make sure that the person on the application is available and is able to answer questions. Again, signatures, we do see this often a little bit more so with the paper development requests because in PECOS it's hard to avoid. A new signature. This is required anytime you are asked to change information on the application. We cannot accept changes on an application without a new signature. So please make sure those are getting signed. Don't just change the section and send it in. We need a signature as well. Again, certifying that yes, the provider or the signer is aware that these changes occurred. And finally, responding timely. There's that 30 business day timeline, and we want to make sure that we're getting this development in timely so that we can avoid rejections, so that we can avoid the need for any resubmissions, and so that we can make sure that if you have an effective date that's going retro, that needs to go retro, we are within the timeline to be able to do that. We don't want you to lose out on your effective date because we didn't have a complete application timely. On this slide, I am including some resources that are available to you. Some CMS resources. One is for PECOS. The other one is the CMS Medicare Enrollment for providers and supplier page. A lot of good information there, a lot of good links. We also have some WPS resources for you, again, for PECOS. Release of information. I've talked a lot about the contacts that are listed on the application, and we have an article out there that talks through all of that. We also have a resource that's available for return and development of CMS 855 enrollment applications. And it talks about the things that we're typically developing for, along with ways to correct those. And then finally, just the steps to successful submission of an enrollment application. This is really just an all-purpose tips and tricks for making sure that you have everything the first time. We really want providers to be able to avoid development and just process the application as quickly as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and check in with Ellen again. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Leanne, we don't have any questions at this time.
All right, thank you. So before I wrap things up, I want to make you aware of an upcoming event that CMS is hosting. They are hosting a National Provider Enrollment Conference this year, and it will be in person. There's going to be a lot of great things on the agenda to help educate the provider and supplier community. There's definitely some provider enrollment one-on-one, and they're going to talk about some changes to regulations coming up that are planned for the upcoming year. This is being held in August. It is August 28th and August 29th, and it is in San Diego. The times for the event are going to vary by day, and obviously there are going to be multiple sessions a day. One of the exciting things about this is a free event to attend. You would need to obviously cover any travel costs, any lodging. However, the event itself is free to register. So in your materials today, I've also included the link to the event so that you can look to see if there's anything that would be interesting to you to consider whether or not you would want to attend that event. So with that ends our presentation for today. On behalf of myself and Ellen and everyone on the GHA Provider Outreach and Education team, I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend today. Again, please take a moment to complete our survey. We are looking forward to those comments, and we really do use those to drive our education. So if you could take a few minutes, I would greatly appreciate that. Again, thank you all for attending today. I hope you continue to be well. You may now disconnect.